Chin. Caponata.
That's old school. That's Sicily right there.
Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown, Sicily, only on CNN.
I'm Vladimir Dutin in Lagos, Nigeria. This is CNN.
Disaster averted in Washington. Lawmakers raise the debt ceiling and reopen the government. I'm Maggie Lake in New York, and Pauline Chu is in Hong Kong. Welcome to World Business Today. The world's biggest economy steps back from the brink. We'll have the latest from Washington and add up the damage that's already been done.
There's a lot of work ahead of us, including our need to earn back the trust of the American people that's been lost over the last few weeks.
The dollar sinks as Congress pushes the problem a few weeks down the road. Business leaders say confidence in America is dented, and U.S. bonds get a downgrade from China.
Plus, a steep plunge in revenue for Goldman Sachs spooks investors. We'll get all the latest on earnings. Well, it is a sigh of relief heard around the world. After a 16-day shutdown, federal employees are headed back to work. The threat of a U.S. debt default has been taken off the table, and Congress will soon begin new budget talks. Many fear we'll be back to square one early next year, but President Obama is more hopeful.
One of the things that I said throughout this process is we've got to get out of the habit of governing by crisis. And my hope and expectation is everybody has learned that there's no reason why we can't work on the issues at hand, why we can't disagree between the parties while still being agreeable, and make sure that we're not inflicting harm on the American people when we do have disagreements.
But the optimism on world markets Wednesday seems to be fading. European stocks are in the red, and U.S. stocks are on track for a lower open. Let's bring in CNN's chief business correspondent, Christine Romans. She joins us now live from Washington. So, Christine, we got a deal. What's in it?
Okay, what's in it? Well, it's a big can that gets kicked down the road here. There's some points in here that really soothe Wall Street's worst fears, but doesn't fix all of our problems. Look, the debt ceiling is extended through the 7th of February, and then this will be revisited most likely. You've got the shutdown ending, government opening here in Washington today. The government funded through January 15th. The budget, you have to attempt a deal by mid-December. You're going to see some talk and some movement on how to actually get a budget agreement. No major changes to Obamacare, Maggie. And the cuts still kick in mid-January for the sequester. So that's what's in this deal. Keeps things going. It basically preserves the status quo. And what I've been saying, Maggie, is congratulations, Washington. Congratulations, Congress. You've narrowly averted a fiscal crisis right now of your own making, but you're going to have to fix it so there's not another one in a couple months.
Celebrating the fact that we can throw ourselves off the cliff, but no doubt about it, we're still standing really close to the ledge, to the edge. And this has all come with a really big price tag, hasn't it, Christine?
It really has. And, you know, yesterday you had Warren Buffett, the world's most famous investor, saying that a debt ceiling is asinine. The shutdown is folly. You had Bill Gross, the founder of the world's biggest bond fund, also saying we shouldn't even have a debt ceiling. You've had Congress fighting with this. And actually, the idea of the budget impasse, even raising interest rates 0.1%, is something that adds to the cost of running the government. It adds all this money to this. That's the irony here. I want you to listen to what Bill Gross said.
It means our interest rates will probably go up by 5 or 10 basis points because of this delay and because of the repercussions of what we've seen for the past several weeks. If we pay, for instance, 0.1% more on our Treasury debt, Treasury bills, and Treasury bonds than we would otherwise, then basically that means the United States would pay $15 billion more per year in terms of interest costs.
$15 billion is a lot of money. The shutdown has cost, according to S&P, $24 billion. $24 billion is enough to fund 2 years of the reduced and free school lunch program in America, feeding 29 million school children. I mean, look, these are big numbers. In the context of our overall economy, obviously those can be absorbed, that economic damage can be absorbed if if you've got a healthy, growing economy on the other side. But we still have these budget problems, Maggie. We still have these budget impasses, and that's why many people feel like it's going to continue to hold back growth. And as Bill Gross says, the irony is if you have rates go up even a little bit, you're adding taxpayers. Taxpayers are paying that much more just to run the government.
That's what's so frustrating. Real cost to real people, all in the name of cutting our deficit. I mean, you can understand why people are just incredulous and so frustrated. Right, Christine, thank you so much for breaking it down. Great to see you in Washington, D.C., following it all for us. We're going to stay on this theme. Former Senator Judd Gregg joins us now. He's also CEO of the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association, or SIFMA, as it's known. It's one of Wall Street's largest lobbying and trade associations. Senator, delighted to see you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. You know Washington well. You spent years there, and I'm sure have been watching this all with some frustration as well. Given the cast of characters that are there now, and I know you know some of them personally, do they have the capacity, as President Obama suggested, to learn anything from this debacle and not have it repeat again? I think people are concerned because there isn't going to be any new blood. They're so divided. There doesn't seem to be a sense of compromise or unity. But what do you think? I mean, can they not prevent this from happening, just to have the same scenario play out again in a month?
Yes, I think they can. I think the forces that were pushing the debate into positions where you could not reach an agreement and took paths which were inevitably on dead ends, such as total repeal of Obamacare, which was never going to happen, or the president's position, which he wasn't going to negotiate on anything, which was really not a viable position either. Those positions and those folks are no longer driving the train. What you have now are people who are interested in governing and interested in resolving the problems which confront us. And the core problem here is the fact that we're spending a lot more money that we're taking in. We're driving the deficits up, and the debt is going up with it, and that's unsustainable. And if we keep on this path, we're going to end up like Greece and be a nation which is much poorer and where our kids have much less opportunity. So I do believe there is the opportunity now, because I think for lack of a better word, the adults are in the room. And hopefully they'll start to talk seriously about how you get these big issues of entitlements and spending under control.
And they are big issues to tackle. Are you worried about what this has done to the U.S.'s credibility abroad?
Well, I'm worried about what it's done to the entire country, not only abroad, but to our own country here. This was a dysfunctional event. It was a disaster from a standpoint of policy and public relations, and it undermines confidence in our government, as it should, because the government acted very poorly. This was not good. It was just plain bad. And it didn't have to happen. It was totally artificial. And hopefully now folks can get in a room and start getting serious. There were some good ideas that came out of this. For example, Paul Ryan put on the table about a week and a half ago a really, I thought, very thoughtful and conscientious approach, which was to take the president's proposal on entitlement reforms and take a pathway to tax reform and merge those two and come up with a way to resolve the problem. I thought that was a good idea. The president has put some good ideas on the table relative to entitlement reform, like changing the CPI. So there are substantive things being talked about that can be accomplished, and if the people who want to govern can grab the microphone back from the folks who want to stand in the corner and shout, then maybe we can get something done.
I certainly tell you, the people, voters in America and investors worldwide need to see that happen and need to get past this chapter. It has been a terrible one. You're right about that. I'm interested, has the Republican Party lost the confidence of the business community? I was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange yesterday, the bastion of what used to be Republican support. And I couldn't believe some of the things I was hearing. There is some real disillusionment and a belief that the Republican Party no longer represents the business community. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think the party's basic themes still remain strong, which is living within our means and having a government that we can afford while delivering the services people want. But unfortunately, there are some shouters in our party who have tried to take control of the party and who, in my opinion, are counterproductive to our basic themes of constructive government with the purpose of fiscal responsibility. They have their own agendas. They're trying to raise money for their PACs, or they're trying to raise their national image. And unfortunately, they get a lot of attention. And I think one of the reasons they get a lot of attention is that the press likes them. They're easy to caricature and make the whole party look like they're make the whole party
wait,
in their
you're not
image,
going
which
to
I think
blame
isn't
this on the
accurate.
media, Senator Gregg, are you? Surely.
No, I'm not blaming it on the media. I'm just saying that these folks are very, they're very attractive political figures in the sense that they're controversial and they create good, they create good language for reporting on. So they get the attention, whereas substantive and thoughtful people don't get that type of attention because they're not flamboyant. I mean, that's just the way it is in our culture, right?
Right, and you bring up a very good point, and let's hope that now that they have stepped up to the microphone, those adults in the room, as you call them, that they do get a lot more attention and that their voice is heard and they take a leadership position, because that is what we need in Washington. Senator Gregg, fantastic to see you this morning. Thank you so much
Nice to see you.
for sharing
Thanks for
your
your
very
time.
particular insight. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Well, it's been a rocky ride for investors over the past month, to put it lightly. As you can see from the volatility index, or the VIX, that fear index as it's called, it gradually built up over the month before receding and then returning with a vengeance in the last couple of days. I want to bring in Alan Valdez now. He's director of floor trading at DME Securities here in New York. Alan and I talk a lot when we are down at the New York Stock Exchange, but he joins us in the bureau today. Alan, talk to me. We just heard sort of Judd Gregg walk us through the sort of political aspect of it. He feels confident now that this isn't going to be repeated. Do investors share that same optimism? They're voting with their money this morning. They seem to be a little more concerned.
Well, today is really more like, buy the rumors, sell the news. Nothing wrong with taking a little profit off the table right now. Even with all this turmoil, the S&P and the Dow basically up 4% over the last 5 days. We're up close to 20% in the S&P for the year. But I think investors have been staying on the sideline. Volume, even through this whole thing, has been very light. So most investors have just been watching this, but they haven't bought into the doomsday scenario that's been out there. And I don't think we ever thought, at least on the floor, we never thought that they'd go over the cliff. They wouldn't be that irresponsible, even though this gang could do it. But overall, the market has been pretty mild throughout this whole thing, except for the volatility. There hasn't been really a big move one way or another.
Can we see it now that this sort of threat is out of the way? And what's going to drive us? Is this still really all about the Fed? Because now that we still have to go through these budget negotiations, a lot of people are saying there isn't any way the Fed's going to taper, which means that liquidity, that juice from the Fed stays in the market.
Maggie, you're 100% right. I mean, if anything, the Fed's definitely not going to taper this year, maybe late in 2014, especially with Yellen coming on board. So no, in some respects, this was a great day for the market, because the tapering has fueled this rally. I mean, it's all really been about that $85 billion a month coming in the market that's had the S&P up over 100% in the last few years. So as far as the market goes, I think it's going to continue its upward trend. There's no reason to pull back at all. In January, what happens again? We think this is just obviously just a short term. It alleviates the pain, but it doesn't cure the patient. And we think we're just going to be back here again.
We are. And Alan, you and I have talked about this. In some ways, we are the beneficiary of the fact that a lot of people don't see an alternative and still like equities relative to everything else. And sometimes that's all you need. Alan Valdez, we're tight on time today. Thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Alan.
Thanks, Maggie.
Pauline, that's what it's looking like here. What are you seeing from the rest of the world's perspective?
Well, here in the Asia-Pacific region, Maggie, there's certainly that sense of frustration. In fact, I spoke with an economist here earlier today, and he doesn't understand this political paralysis in Washington. He said politicians in Congress not only shot themselves in the foot with a gun, they shot themselves in the foot with a bazooka. I mean, that's how frustrated and that's how people feel here. They just don't understand what's the shenanigans there on Capitol Hill. Well, President Barack Obama is expected to make a statement in just over an hour. That's scheduled for about 10:35 Eastern Time, and you can see it right here live on CNN. And coming up next on World Business Today, we'll have a look at the international reaction to this U.S. fiscal deal.
Human to Hero, in association with Nikon.
My name is Maxime Charveron. I'm a French BMX freestyle professional rider, and I'm 22 years old. I won the BMX contest in Pessac, which is famous in France for BMX rider. In BMX freestyle, there's different type of riding. There is the street, you ride on the street. The dirt, you ride big jump, dirt jump. You can ride skate park. If your bike is good, you will feel like Your bike is not even there. It's you. It's a part of your body. My dream tricks is not a special move. It's just to go big, fast and high. It's about pushing the limits and find new stuff to do.
To see a new world, we try. To see a new world, we explore. To see a new world, we don't give up. We try and try. Maybe it's because we want to see a new world. Let's try together, and let's go see a new world.
Welcome back to World Business Today, live from Hong Kong and New York. With the debt agreement signed in Washington, let's take a look at how European markets are doing at the moment as we are just a couple of hours away from the close. They are all in negative territory except for the Zurich SMI. The markets as a whole broke a 5-day winning streak today. Now, even though retail data out of the UK was good, up at 2.2% for the month of September, we see the FTSE down by about 0.4%. We can get the traders' perspective right now. CNN's Isa Suarez is live on the trading floor at CMC Markets in London. Isa, what are people there saying about this temporary agreement in the U.S.?
Hi, Pauline. There's definitely more noise here today than there was yesterday. I think traders slightly more relieved that the drama out of Washington's over and done with, at least until next year. I've been creating a bit more drama. Their lives anyway. I've been bothering non-stop. Matt is one of those people I've been bothering pretty much over the last couple of days. Matt, let's talk about the markets here in Europe. Asian markets, we saw a bit of a rally. Why isn't Europe following suit?
Well, I think a lot of our excitement was out of the way yesterday, so we sort of priced in the success of the talks eventually. And what we've seen this morning really is selling of the fact across Europe. So the major indices opened much lower, rallied their best to try and break even, but have now just dipped again heading into the US Open.
Is there some risk, though? Because we know that, I know the can just been, you know, the kick down the road, so to speak, until next year. Does the risk remain, or are you happy with the way the deal has been done?
Yeah, a lot of our clients are talking about the issue of it just raising its head again in January, and so rather than piling more risk onto the table now, they're actually taking a much more reserved approach, saying that eventually we're going to come to this point again, albeit 5 months down the line.
So in that case, what are you advising them?
Well, currently our clients are taking a very sort of market-neutral stance, so where they do have long equity positions, rather than adding to those, they're taking hedges against them and trying to be very specific in their views, rather than just piling risk into the market carte blanche.
And you're talking specifically about the US economy?
Yeah, so clients with long US equity positions are generally taking short S&P against them, again, trying to stay market neutral. But even in Europe, we've taken some risk off the table today, and that probably is reflected in the move we've seen.
S&P came out with a couple of facts early this morning, really overnight, talking about the damage is done to the economy, about $24 billion. That's $1.5 billion a day. Yeah. Do you think that's realistic? I mean, what kind of damage what have you been feeling the last couple of days?
Yeah, it's very difficult to quantify the numbers, but it doesn't sound unreasonable to say that those are probably in the ballpark. I think the greater damage than the financial damage is the risk that damage has been done to investor appetite and investor risk appetite, and that's probably more damaging in the medium term.
And with the fact that, you know, this is just going on until next year, people, I'm sure, won't be spending as much come January, February, surely?
Yeah, so consumer appetite's obviously been dented as well, but I think the main issue is that us as traders and also our clients really can't put money to work in the markets as aggressively as they would without the certainty of knowing what the political backdrop is. And while that remains unresolved in the medium term, I think we'll probably see some hesitancy from our clients over the next 6 months.
Hesitancy. And looking ahead very quickly to next week, a slew of economic data that you don't know when really it's coming out, because that's been held for the last couple of weeks. What's the tone? What tone are you expecting out of this data?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously what we're looking at now is backwards-looking data that we should have had weeks ago. But I think the interesting thing will be how they release it, whether it comes in one bundle as has being proposed by various participants. And when we do see that, it's likely that we'll see significant volatility, albeit on data that's probably now 2 weeks old.
Thank you. So there you go, Pauline. Volatility, they are breathing a sigh of relief for now. Expect more volatility, but on the whole, European markets are up about between 1.5 and 2.5% since October the 1st, so they're taking it on the chin.
Yeah, but still a lot of disillusionment out there among traders and investors. And the data that he was talking about is that September jobs data that was supposed to come out a little while ago, but it looks like it's going to be a couple more days before we actually get it in the U.S. Well, Issa, as in Europe, the temporary resolution has been a hot topic here in Asia. Of course, it's been weighing on the markets here like everywhere else. And there were some pretty harsh headlines in the papers right here in Hong Kong this morning, such as this. We'll translate it for you. It basically says America's self-destruction, the world suffering because of U.S. politics, and how lawmakers have been playing with fire. Societe Generale's chief economist for Asia Pacific, Klaus Bader, gave me his take.
The Chinese party paper called for the de-Americanization of the world. That all sounds great, and I think that reflects the level of anger and concern that exists in the world. The trouble is, of course, not even the Chinese Communist Party has any idea how we're going to go about de-Americanizing the global financial system. The U.S. is showing absolutely no credible long-term fiscal strategy. None. And that is, of course, disconcerting. And I think if the world had a choice, they would go for that alternative. But the trouble is, the world doesn't have a choice at this stage to U.S. treasuries.
Now, China is the biggest overseas holder of U.S. debt, so it would have been directly and heavily affected by a debt default by the U.S. One of the country's ratings agencies actually downgraded the U.S. today. Da Gong, which has close ties to the Chinese government, cut its credit rating for the U.S. from A to A-. It says, quote, the government is still approaching the verge of default crisis, a situation that cannot be substantially alleviated in the foreseeable future. Now, let's take a look at how the Asian Pacific markets reacted, because this region was the first to react once there was a resolution there in Washington. At first, shares rallied, but then they settled off their highs. And then we ended with a mixed picture here. The dollar gained against the Japanese yen, which helped boost stocks of Japanese exporters. Hong Kong and Shanghai closed down. Overall, still concerns that a fiscal deal is just a Band-Aid solution, because we may revisit all of this chaos again in January and February. And World Business Today will be right back after this short break.
Discover Azerbaijan from A to Z.
Welcome back. The big question for world markets is, have U.S. lawmakers learned anything from the debt ceiling drama that has hurt their credibility around the world? Well, Nuno dos Santos spoke to hedge fund manager Lex Van Dam in London about the international impact.
So, Lex, you run a hedge fund. What have the last 17 days been like? How is what's going on in America affecting the hedge fund world here in Europe?
Sure. I mean, it's kind of strange, because suddenly we have to become experts in what's happening in the U.S. Congress, what's happening in the Senate. You know, it's not what we usually do. Every morning when we come in, we look at the U.S. newspapers, see what's going on. So suddenly, you know, all eyes on what's happening in American politics.
And all eyes firmly fixed on things like this. This is a U.S. government 30-year bond, isn't it?
Exactly. So the issue is that interest rates in the U.S. are going up anyway. So if you look here, the 30-year rate in April was 2.8%, and it's gone up to about 3.8% already. What worries me is that, you know, being abroad, not being in the U.S., that we're so dependent on the decisions of US politicians. So we are like a pawn in the political process. And if you're Japan or if you're China and you're lending so much money to the US, and this is the way it's being treated, then that is very worrying.
So how is all this, what's going on in America, affecting your portfolio?
Well, global markets are, like a lot of them, are trading at all-time highs or near all-time highs. But the underlying issue remains. The US is borrowing too much money, the Fed is flooding the system with cheap money, and debt around the world is just too high. And I think that when rates go up, if this political process will lead to higher rates, then it will be very hard for global markets to take this.
How high do you think something like this can go before we really see a tipping point for America?
Well, I think the issue is not how high it can go. The issue is that how long can it be controlled? And at the moment, the Fed is controlling interest rates, short-term, long-term, by just buying and buying them. But there's a point where foreign investors who own 50% of the treasury market are going to say enough is enough.
So as a market participant, what's your message to Washington?
I would say you're playing with fire. US treasuries are the safest instrument in the world. If that stops being the case, then it's going to be very difficult to finance the US deficit, and then you will see what happens.
And what will happen?
I think it's the trust in the US will totally go away, and the growth of debt in the US is still 4, 5, 6%. So it's an unsustainable situation. Growth is being financed by debt, and it's not real growth. So it's like a mirage.
Let's hope lawmakers are heeding those warnings. We're moments away from the new start of a session on Wall Street. We will bring you the opening bell and all the action when we return. Stay with us.
Innovation Exchange, in association with Standard Bank.
An artery of community life. This winding outdoor escalator sends you through one of Medellin's poorest hillside areas. It also acts as a lifeline to the city centre and the job market. It's just one of many projects that helped Medellin be named the world's most innovative city by the Urban Land Institute, a leading NGO. In recent years, the murder rate has plunged. The city has pioneered a theory known as urban acupuncture, reclaiming areas lost to cartels through strategic projects.
This was once one of the most crime-ridden areas of Medellin, where Pablo Escobar used to recruit assassins. Now, this library provides an iconic focal point of learning for the community and a way of fighting crime.
Innovation Exchange, in association with Standard Bank.
Tonight on CNN, International Desk with Hala Garani, followed by Amanpour. Then CNN News Center with Aisha Sasay. It's your new evening lineup, tonight on CNN.
These are the wrecks of just some of the vessels that have brought thousands of immigrants here to Lampedusa.
This is taking you to the heart of the story.
You can see some of the refugees have left items of clothing, a pair of jeans here. You get a sense that if you imagine hundreds of people crammed onto this ship, just how desperate those making that dangerous journey from North Africa to here must be.
This is CNN. CNN original series Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown, Sicily.
Our octopus.
Cuttlefish.
Pancetta.
Neonata.
Oh, that looks good.
This cheese?
How do you say it in Italian?
Swordfish. Looks like hell. Tastes like heaven. Smells good in here.
Chin. Caponata.
That's old school. That's Sicily right there.
Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown, Sicily, only on CNN.
I'm Patrick Upman in Havana, Cuba. This is CNN.
Is the opening bell at the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. Markets are open for business. Looks like we're going to see a little bit of give back. Welcome back to World Business Today. We are live from Hong Kong and New York today. Traders very much buying the rumor of a deal yesterday, and today it looks like we're going to be a little bit selling on the news. This is very often the case. Probably not going to put too much stock in it, even though we might see triple-digit losses, rather. Just a little bit of give back. In essence, we're sort of standing still and churning here. Investors are relieved, but they know full well that the sort of deficit wrangling isn't over. Congress just kicked the can a couple of months, couple of weeks even. So we're going to be facing this situation again. They're going to look for signs that we don't see a repeat, I think, before they start to get some confidence in Washington. And meanwhile, we've got a lot of earnings to get through as well. We'll talk about those in just a little bit. But Pauline, how are we looking where you are?
Well, Maggie, here in the Asia-Pacific region, we ended with a bit of a mixed bag on the indices here. Tokyo and Sydney were up on news of the U.S. debt deal, but Hong Kong and Shanghai closed down in negative territory, with, of course, China holding the most U.S. debt in terms of foreign holdings, and not entirely convinced with the solution, this temporary solution out of Washington, Maggie.
And the European stock markets, if we take a look, similar situation really we face here. They moved sharply higher on Wednesday on those early reports that a deal was happening, but a very different story, as you can see right now, except for Zurich. They're hanging in there. But we are seeing losses, again, not major losses, just a little bit of a give back on the actual news. Pauline?
Yeah, we're just going to take a little bit of a break from business news now and update you on the top world news stories that we're following right here on CNN. In Syria, state-run media says a United Nations worker has been released 8 months after he was kidnapped near Damascus. The report said Carl Campeau from Canada had been abducted by terrorists and has now been handed over to the UN representative in Damascus. In Japan, 18 people were killed after Typhoon Waifa hit the Tokyo area on Wednesday. Rescuers are searching for 44 people reported missing on Oshima Island, which is south of the capital. Heavy rain caused flooding and landslides there. Look at that dramatic video. Well, a staggering 30 million people live as slaves around the world. The Global Slavery Index has just been published by the Walk Free Foundation. This anti-slavery group says 4% of Mauritania's population is enslaved, but the report finds that India has by far the most people in forced labor, nearly 14 million.
A lot of experts would say that's a conservative number. India has a massive problem with forced labour, bonded labour. There are whole communities that are forced to work on brick kilns or forced to work in stone quarries. Kids are working in carpet factories. So it's a massive problem.
Now, the World Health Organization says it's official. Air pollution can cause cancer. The more exposed people are to fine particles and other air pollutants, the higher the risk of developing lung and bladder cancer. The UN agency warns that people in developing countries with big populations and booming manufacturing are particularly at risk. The U.S. government is back in business, and the debt ceiling has been raised. After 16 days of shutdown, lawmakers finally struck a deal. Although some fear it hasn't addressed the root cause of the problem, it's been warmly welcomed in many corners. World Bank President Jim Yong Kim said this is good news for developing countries and also the world's poor. The global economy dodged a potential catastrophe. Meanwhile, IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde has also commented on Wednesday's breakthrough. She said the U.S. Congress has taken an important and necessary step by ending the partial shutdown of the federal government and lifting the debt ceiling. Looking forward, it will be essential to reduce uncertainty surrounding the conduct of fiscal policy by raising the debt limit in a more durable manner. And durable meaning that 3 months is not exactly durable in terms of a time period to resolve this whole issue, Maggie.
No, that's right. Let's talk about the concern that all we have is this short-term fix and what we're going to do about it. Sean West joins us. He's a U.S. policy director at the consultancy Eurasia Group, which studies political risk. And boy, this is perfect for you, Sean. That's all it's been in Washington is political risk. And that's putting it nicely. Talk to me about how you feel about this. You know, we heard both from President Obama and a former senator we talked to earlier in the show sort of spinning it and saying, listen, we think they've learned their lessons. The adults are in the room now. Do you buy that?
No, I don't think they learned their lessons here. This is the return of political risk in the U.S. I mean, investors had a bit of a luxury the last 6 to 9 months to ignore the political risk, and then it came back in full force with these fiscal fights. The bottom line is the two parties just have different visions about fiscal policy, and they're willing to fight over it, and they're willing to bring the economy into that battle, and the economy gets bruised in the process.
Yeah, at a time when we don't need it. You know, we're already trying to sort of achieve escape velocity, which seems to be hard to do. You know, it's interesting. In the middle of all this, everyone's expressing they're so concerned about the deficits. They're so concerned about the deficit. I saw some interesting commentary just sort of slipped in there that the deficit has actually been shrinking, probably because of the, you know, ill-conceived sequester, but it has been moving in the right direction. Is it possible to see that continue? I mean, you know, does that help at all? Where are we in terms of how serious this deficit problem is in the U.S.?
Yeah, I don't actually think this fight has been about the deficit at all. Like you said, the deficit's nearly gone in half, totally sustainable level, at least for the next couple of years. The two parties are picking a fight with each other because they have different visions for what our government should be doing. Republicans want less spending. Democrats don't mind the spending as long as it's funded by higher taxes. But that's totally divorced from the fact that actually the budget position of the U.S. is stable for now. And that's part of the reason why this fight has been so nasty. This has been zero-sum. This isn't about finding a win-win deal where both sides are fixing the deficit together. This is literally about extracting political victories from each other in the process of a battle. And so we're going to return in December, a budget conference committee that's supposed to find a way forward, but there's no way forward when there's no deficit problem. And we're right back in it with a potential government shutdown in January and a new debt ceiling only a month later that we've got to raise again.
Sean, this is Pauline Chu in Hong Kong. The Fed is meeting later on this month, and from what we could see from the minutes from its earlier meeting, there was some concern from some FOMC board members that if they didn't start tapering, they would lose credibility. I mean, that was a month ago. We don't even have tapering in our vocabulary right now. But because of what we've seen on Capitol Hill, when the Fed meets again, I mean, they do get some political cover now, don't they, if they decide not to taper?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, certainly the buzz in the markets has been the fact that if political gridlock is as bad as we think it is, and we just got a great demonstration of that, then the Fed can wait and see if Congress bruises the economy more before it starts to remove extraordinary measures that it's put in place, or extraordinary monetary policy. Big Fed story, though, in the next month will be the pathway forward for Janet Yellen. I do think the positive has been the fact that with this debt ceiling pushed out for a couple of months, all the budget deadlines pushed out, there's a much clearer path forward to getting Yellen confirmed and a new Fed chair in January to keep this going forward.
And Sean, I just want to circle back to something you said, which is absolutely spot on. This has just been about politics, political victory, and I would say hurting the other side politically, which is the absolute worst way to govern and get something constructive done. Are we benefiting as a country by the fact that there is not really an alternative, a viable alternative? A lot of people are saying we need to de-Americanize the global financial system. We sense that they mean it, but there doesn't seem to be another option, which I guess is helping us see less fallout than we would normally if people were to turn away from treasuries.
Yeah, absolutely. We call this the safe haven curse. I mean, being a safe haven is great, but it curses you in the sense that you can't actually make any of the reforms you need longer term because there are no alternatives. The U.S. benefits from this safe haven status in such a way that there's no real pressure to actually consider the long-term reforms that it needs, and other countries are basically stuck with us. We heard a little bit of discontent from China and Japan earlier this week as the U.S. was headed for the debt ceiling. But the reality is, as long as we don't cross that line, as long as interest and principal is not actually at risk, nobody's got any choice but to stick with the dollar, stick with treasuries. And as a result, Congress knows it can play these games and not really suffer long-term consequences.
Not long-term consequences from economics, but we'll see what happens when the voters go in the midterm elections. Memories are short, but hopefully they remember this episode and do something about it. Sean West from the Eurasia Group, thank you so much for joining us. Fantastic to talk to you.
Thank you.
After the break, we're going to go live to the New York Stock Exchange and a chance to catch up on Wall Street's biggest names. It's earnings season. We'll be back in a minute.
Innovation Exchange in association with Standard Bank.
An artery of community life. This winding outdoor escalator sends you through one of Medellin's poorest hillside areas. It also acts as a lifeline to the city center and the job market. It's just one of many projects that helped Medellin be named the world's most innovative city by the Urban Land Institute, a leading NGO. In recent years, the murder rate has plunged. The city has pioneered a theory known as urban acupuncture, reclaiming areas lost to cartels through strategic projects.
This was once one of the most crime-ridden areas of Medellin, where Pablo Escobar used to recruit assassins. Now, this library provides an iconic focal point of learning for the community and a way of fighting crime.
Innovation Exchange in association with Standard Bank.
Welcome to the world's 9th largest country, seated in the heart of the Eurasian continent. To the country that has access to a potential market of 500 million people. To Central Asia's strongest economy with the most attractive tax climate in the Commonwealth of Independent States and Eastern Europe. Make use of the state program of accelerated industrialization that made us number 10 in the World Investor Protection List. Join those who are already joining this. Discover, explore, invest in Kazakhstan.
My voice, my story,
my life. In South Africa.
In Kenya. South Sudan.
Hear Africa's voices.
A way of understanding the world.
A dog to the soul.
In Africa.
In Africa.
In Africa.
CNN African Voices.
My name is Ziad Mahirsi. I'm a global health professional. I'm a social entrepreneur. Hear my story on CNN African Voices.
African Voices, Sunday on CNN in association with Glow.
You see the Dow, they're down almost 100 points at the moment. U.S. markets have been open for just over 10 minutes. Let's get the latest from the trading floor. Allison Kozik is live at the New York Stock Exchange. And Allison, data just came out on jobless claims. What do you have?
Exactly, Pauline. We did find out that weekly jobless claims fell by 15,000 last week to 358,000. The elevated level, though, continuing to reflect these processing glitches that have been happening in California, which recently switched to a new application system. Now, interestingly enough, we did not see a huge impact in the claims number because of the government shutdown. As for the broader market, I'll tell you what, not quite the reaction you'd expect after we finally reached a deal. The Dow, as you said, trading down 99 points, about 101 now. That's after gaining almost 600 points over the past week on optimism a deal would be reached in time to avoid a default. The problem is that most people think we're going to be right back to this point in just a few months. And while this does give lawmakers some breathing space for now, it could mean increased volatility and yet more uncertainty at the beginning of the year. One analyst putting it this way, saying the muted reaction reflects that investors really aren't so surprised that Congress reached a deal, but also that they're aware it's just a short-term solution. It's more of that proverbial kicking the can down the road, Pauline.
Yeah, that's why you see the Dow down right now, because reality has set in that we could be set up for another fight in just a couple of months. But for now, with the government shutdown out of the way today, we can focus more on corporate earnings. Who are you watching for today?
Funny enough, it is easy to forget that we've been in the midst of third quarter earnings season with all the drama going on Capitol Hill. So yeah, the big one that we're reading over today, Goldman Sachs, it's the fifth of the big banks clocking in with results today. Goldman said it boosted its dividend and posted a better than expected profit in the third quarter, but it posted a big drop in revenue, and that's exactly what investors are zeroing in on. We are seeing shares of Goldman Sachs down 2.5%. CEO Lloyd Blankfein saying the results reflected a period of slow client activity. Blankfein has also commented on the Washington dysfunction and was a bit more upbeat, saying as longer-term budget issues are resolved, we could see improvement in corporate and investor sentiment. Pauline?
Yeah, he's been quite vocal about the whole debt showdown recently. Allison, thank you very much. That's Allison Kozik there, live from the New York Stock Exchange. Let's move over now to the NASDAQ. Now, have you thought about what you're hoping for this holiday season, or is it a bit too early for that? We know what the folks at eBay want. They want lots of clicks, but they're saying it's actually not guaranteed. Maribel Aber is live at the NASDAQ, and she's been looking at their figures. Hi, Maribel.
Hi, Pauline. Well, eBay reported good news for now, but the company advises caution down the road. It reported higher earnings and revenue in the third quarter. eBay, you know what, it got a boost as consumers made greater use of its PayPal online payment service. eBay reported a 14% increase in third quarter revenue. Profit was up 17% from a year earlier, but the political infighting in Congress is making eBay really nervous about the holiday shopping season. Declining consumer confidence could actually make consumers less likely to spend more over the holidays, and they also wouldn't be using eBay's PayPal service. I do want to show you eBay stock right now. It's down 4.6% here at $51.09. Pauline, with these issues coming back in just a few months we keep talking about here, timing doesn't help when it comes to holiday sales. After juggling how to manage finances without pay for 16 days, people really may be hesitant to spend.
Yeah, and in fact, Standard & Poor's issued a statement saying that they don't expect the holiday season to be very good because Americans are going to be so cautious about opening up their wallets, and S&P actually said it might be a humbug holiday season. All right, Maribel, thank you very much. Maribel Aber there live at the NASDAQ. Maggie.
And Pauline, as you and I both know, after doing this, nobody really knows what the consumers get into. I've seen so many predictions just come up false. It really sort of depends on the mindset just in that crucial holiday period. Well, another big report for anyone interested in tech comes out later, third quarter earnings from Google. This is going to be a big one. There's even more interest in them right now after Yahoo this week gave a cautious outlook. Let's bring in CNN Money's technology editor, David Goldman, who is a busy man this week. But David, probably unfair of us to group those two together because I do think people tend to think of Yahoo as a bit more legacy and Google as a bit more sort of, you know, in the moment or the new powerhouse. But it's all about mobile, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Google has really suffered in the mobile business the past few quarters. You know, they're trying to sell ads just the way that they do on desktop on mobile phones, and it hasn't been working out as well for them because mobile advertisers aren't willing to pay as much as online desktop advertisers. So they think that they can get there, and they have these new enhanced campaigns that they think will drive up sales. But so far, it's been a little tepid. And then speaking of mobile, Motorola is a business that they acquired, and that continues to lose money too. So Google has some pretty big mobile problems.
You know, it's interesting. Yeah, part of it, though, isn't that people don't want to advertise. I just want to drill down on this so we're clear for our viewers. It's because there was this weird pricing system that was really left over from when the web dominated, and people thought because the screens were smaller, they weren't going to pay as much for those mobile ads. Google's trying to really blow that up within this enhanced campaign or whatever you called it. It's a sort of, you know, lingo jargon for we want to charge you more, we're changing our pricing, and say, hey, you know where they are. You have location identifiers now. This is actually more valuable than what you pay for on the web, where, by the way, no one goes anymore. But that's not probably going to be an easy sell, is it?
No, it hasn't been so far. I mean, certainly there are companies that want to take advantage of people's mobile usage because those are the devices that we have with us all day. But they're still not convinced, as you said, that those clicks are as valuable as clicks that are made on a PC or a desktop computer. So there's that nice little metric that Google gives called cost per click, and that's been going down steadily over the past year or so. So that's something with enhanced campaigns that Google is hoping to get back up, and they're convinced it's going going to happen, but analysts and advertisers aren't quite there with them yet.
And you know, just lastly, quickly, David, it's funny because they're the elephant in the room, though, right? I mean, that when you have that kind of power of reach, you can change the rules. And sometimes, even though everybody yells about it, they're going to have to come calling. So it'll be interesting if they do it. It might benefit everybody, including the likes of Yahoo. Just very quickly, if Google disappoints, is that going to be a real blow to sentiment? Because I know a lot of people disappointed by some other sectors were sort of looking for technology to lead the market this time around. So does Google have sort of a bigger impact footprint because of that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Google is kind of becoming a software bellwether in the way that Intel is a hardware bellwether, right? Intel's chips are in everything. Google is the web in many ways. You know, everyone gets to other websites through Google. If, you know, if they can grow their sales and earnings more than expected, that could be a really, really good sign for other online companies. Certainly, we didn't see that from Yahoo, so all eyes are on Google to see if the web business is going to be good this past quarter.
Yeah, and lucrative. All right, a lot riding on it. David Goldman, great to see you. Thanks so much. Google stock is currently trading higher ahead of those earnings. Megan Smith, the vice president of Google's secret lab, Google X, offered her own idea for steering U.S. lawmakers away from possible future budget showdowns.
I respect, you know, the challenges they're facing. I think they need to figure out how to collaborate better. I have a crazy fun idea. I guess I'm a Googler. I think it'd be really interesting in this age of creative collaboration with the web to actually put the budget data up online and ask the Americans, especially the youth of America, challenge them, contest whatever, ask them to help solve the problem.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Maybe the public will come up with a solution that the politicians cannot. Well, coming up next, China is really a skip and a hop away from Hong Kong if you consider the many alternatives that you can take to get there. We'll tell you how easy it is on the Gateway.
The network of downstream petroleum converges in Africa. From the heart of the continent comes the core.
Nigeria's downstream is open for business.
Oil Trading and Logistics Expo, OTL Africa.
Some days, no matter how hard you think, ideas refuse to come. But you can't go till you find success. From the business office, innovation arises. Somebody might even invent a time machine here one day. Go further, human brain. Let Konica Minolta bring power to your office.
Giving shape to ideas. Konica Minolta.
CNN News Center, tonight on CNN.
Railways will not only have renaissance, it is the future of transport development. Russian Railways is a unique company with huge number of employees. We are linking not only the cities inside Russia, we are linking globally. From the beginning of the company, we were targeting closer cooperation with the best companies in the world.
Russian Railways, 10 years of success. The journey has just begun.
The Gateway, in association with Russian Railways. The journey has just begun.
Welcome back to World Business Today. It's been a decade since the SARS epidemic hit Hong Kong, and that health scare forced the city to think about how to pull in more visitors. Well, one thing it did was open up new connections to mainland China. Here's Andrew Stevens on this week's Gateway.
It's a Thursday afternoon, and for many Hong Kongers, this is where the journey to China begins. From here at the Hong Kong MTR station, travellers can either take a cross-boundary train to the border or an intercity train straight into China.
We're very mindful that we provide the best possible service to our citizens going to China, as well as bringing Chinese people to Hong Kong. And we think that the economic growth between the two places also hinges on how easy transportation is.
Commuters and tourists alike have taken full advantage of just how easy it is. In 2012, more than 100 million people used the cross-boundary service and 4 million used the intercity trains. Soon, the MTR will make it even easier when it opens its express rail link in 2015 that will connect Hong Kong with other high-speed rail lines in China.
This train is the last to depart. Since 2003, when we had some difficulty due to SARS, and then the government introduced a policy whereby the mainland individual travelers can come to Hong Kong very freely. So since then, we have almost double-digit growth, like on an annual basis.
Air travel growth has followed as well. HKIA now has 48 mainland destinations, 1,000 daily flights, and more than 100 airlines servicing China, including Hong Kong's flagship, Cathay Pacific.
I've learned never to be surprised at how fast China develops. So the development has been fast, it's been good development, and I think what you're going to see on the travel side is also good development. The number of passengers who, want to go outbound is clearly large and growing.
And if you can't get to your final destination by plane or train, you can hit the road or take to the seas. Passengers can transfer straight from their flight to 8 different locations in China by ferry. There's no need to go through immigration, and even their baggage will be checked straight through. There are also 550 daily bus trips to more than 110 cities in China, as well as private car rentals available. Hong Kong has positioned itself to be a crucial link, helping people to get into every corner of China. And it's good business to stay that way.
The message here is that a lot of places realize that travel and being a travel hub that people, want to go to and find it easy to go to get other places has value. I mean, we know that here in Hong Kong. Other places know it too. What we've got to do is make sure we stay ahead of the competition.
Let's come back to our top story, how Congress dodged the debt deadline, or as countless people are putting it, how lawmakers kicked the can down the road, which seems to be everyone's favorite metaphor right now.
This deal kicks the can down the road.
We are kicking the can, but better to kick the can than to stomp on the can.
At the same time, we can't keep kicking the can down the road.
Instead of kicking the can down the road,
kick the can down the road. And kick the can down the road.
And the problem is we continue to kick it down the road.
It's hard not to be cynical when we've seen the can kick down the road so many times.
We will continue to kick this thing down the road and with real harmful effect for the American populace.
There's some can that would like to be kicked, I can tell you, by the American people. Now, it was a long day for the lawmakers and staffers on Capitol Hill. And for one lady, it was all just too much. Now, I know you see that white circle, very hard to see in what's happening here. We just wanted to sort of give you a scene setter. A woman who is a House stenographer walked up to the podium while the lawmakers were voting on a budget bill, and she just started yelling, "Do not be deceived. God shall not be mocked. And a House divided cannot stand." She was promptly escorted out by the sergeant at arms. People were absolutely shocked. They know the woman, many of them, and say she's actually very nice, very professional, have never exhibited any kind of this behavior before, and they were really surprised at her actions. But I think an awful lot of us feel for her. This whole mess has really driven people to the edge, quite literally. Let's take one last check of U.S. markets. As you can see, investors taking some profits today and sitting back and taking, doing a little bit of selling. Triple-digit loss for the Dow, 104. That is only about a half of what we gained yesterday, so a little bit of sell the news. President Obama is due to address the debt deal in a half an hour. We will have that for you live. Thanks very much for being with us. That's it for WBT. We'll see you next time.
This year, we are celebrating 10 years of the Russian Railways Company. In that time, we further link Eurasia through our ever-evolving network. We launched high-speed rail in Russia and evolved the Russian economy by generating billions in revenue. We connected people and facilitated industry from east to west. And we did it all with a focus on ecological responsibility. Russian Railways, the journey has just begun.
business of bringing joy, Kirloskar goes much beyond enriching lives.
CNN original series Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown, Sicily.
Octopus. Cuttlefish. Pancetta. Neonata. Oh, that looks good. This juice. How do you say it in Italian? Swordfish. Looks like hell. Tastes like heaven. Smells good in here.
Chin. Caponata.
That's old school. That's Sicily right there.
Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown, Sicily. Only on CNN.